Both have purports. So I'll read through, I'll chant both verses and then give devotees an opportunity to chant. Ashish Pusho Pura Purya Navidvaram Apannata Tatrapanas Tato Mritu Takvam Ubayashrayam. Ashish Riposh Pura Purya Nabidvaram Apannata Tatrapanas Tato Mritu Pritavakam Ubayashrayam. Ashish Posh Pura Purya Nabidvaram Apannata Tatrapanas Tato Mritu Pritakvam Ubayashrayam. Devotees, would anyone like to chant the verse?
Asisupso pura purya nabhidvaram apanatha tatrapanastato mrityu pritakvam ubhayashrayam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Asisripso pura purya nabhidvaram apanataha tatrapanastato mrityu pitakvam upayashrayam. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Ashishripshoho puraha purya navidvaram apanataha tratra pranastato mrittuhu prithakvam uvayashrayam.
Hare Krishna. Ashish Parashaha Puraha Purya Nabhidaram Apanataha Dakshapanastatu Mittu Prithakadbham Ubhayashrayam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I'll read through this now, and anyone else would like to chant, we can do it for the next verse. Synonyms. Ashripo, Pusho, desiring to go everywhere. Pura, in different bodies. Purya, from one body. Nabi Dvaram, the navel or abdominal hole. Apanata, was manifested. Tatra, thereupon. Apana, stopping of the vital force. Tata, thereafter. Mritu, death. Pritakvam, separately. Ubhaya, both. Ashrayam, shelter. Translation. Thereafter, when he desired to move from one body to another, the navel and the air of departure and death were combinedly created. The navel is the shelter for both, namely death and the separating force. The prana vayu continues the life, and the apana vayu stops the living force. Both the vibrations are generated from the abdominal hole, the navel. This navel is the joint from one body to the other. Lord Brahma was born of the abdominal hole of Garbhodakshai Vishnu as a separate body. And the same principle is followed even in the birth of an ordinary body. The body of the child develops from one from the body of the mother, and when the child is separated from the body of the mother, it is separated by cutting the navel joint. And that is the way the Supreme Lord manifested himself as separated many. The living entities are therefore separated parts, and thus they have no independence. Okay, yeah, scroll down a little, thank you. Text 29. Adit sor anapananam ashan kukshu antanadhaya nadya sumudras chatayos tushti pushtis tad ashraye aditor anapananam ashan kukshu antranadaya nadya sumudras chatayos tushti pushtis tad ashraye aditshor anapananam ashan kukshu antranadaya nadya sumudras chatayos tushti pushtis tad ashraye. Anyone who didn't chant would like to chant this verse? Or anyone who did? Okay, I'll go through the synonyms.
uh.
Go ahead. No? Okay.
Aditsor Annapananam Asan Kusha Anantanadaya Nadya Samudrascha Tayas Tushti Pushtistad Ashre. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Aditsar annapananam ashankukshi antranadaya nadaya samudrasya trayas tushti pushti tad asray. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Absolutely. Aditsur anna pananam asan kuksha antra nadayah natya samudrascha tayos tushtihi pustito tad ashaye. Hare Krishna.
Synonyms. Aditsho, desiring to have. Anapananam, of food and drink. Ashan, there became. Kukshi, the abdomen. Antra, the intestines. Nadaya, and the arteries. Nadya, the rivers. Samudra, seas. Cha, also. Tayo, of them. Tushti, sustenance. Pushti, metabolism. Tat, of them. Ashraye, the source. When there was a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines and also the arteries became manifested. The rivers and seas are the source of their sustenance and metabolism. The controlling deities of the intestines are the rivers, and those of the arteries, the seas. Fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. Therefore, the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and the arteries. The rivers and seas, being the controlling deities of the two, keep the intestines and the arteries in healthy order. Om Jnana Tinurangasya Dhananjana Shalakaya Chakshulanmilitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Anhobisham Stapitam Jaina Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Sva Padantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Before I begin, I would like to ask permissions and blessings from all the advanced and all the devotees here in attendance all over the universe, and give me blessings so that I may speak something in line with Srila Prabhupada and that I do not cause any offenses in my attempts. Hare Krishna. Two very interesting verses. In English, we have a saying, or in America, maybe we can say, that the truth is stranger than fiction. Has anyone ever heard that?
Yep.
Yes, the truth is stranger than fiction. And what we're reading about in these verses is very strange from a practical perspective. Hard to understand, maybe hard to accept for some, for those that don't, especially for those with a very scientifically, on the surface, for those that have a very scientifically, analytically prone mind. Some of these points in these verses, and of course throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, may be challenging to accept. For example, that the creator of the universe, Lord Brahma, was born out of the navel of Garbhodakshai Vishnu, from the stem of a lotus flower. And so from the scientific perspective, they would say, well, that's just a fairy tale. We've never seen anything like that. But actually, we could see that so many of the things in just these verses alone, we can, if we have our intelligence awake enough to be able to look and see things, then we can see that actually many of the seemingly unbelievable aspects of this have their parallels in things that we can see with our own senses. Like, human beings are growing inside other human beings. The process of birth, conception, and as we see here, there's a cord that is connecting the two. And I think that's called the umbilical cord. And actually, the one body is feeding the other body through this cord. And the cord here is described in this region of the body, the navel, where humans are actually birthed and grown, just like Lord Brahma is being fed by Garbhodakshai Vishnu in the lotus stem growing up, just like that. Maybe not just like, but in that kind of perverted reflection we have in this material world, human beings are being fed from their source to grow a body. And if, let's say, we're from another planet that things like this didn't occur, for us to accept and believe and understand that this is how all human beings have come into existence would also be very difficult to understand. So an important point to keep in mind and recognize is that we have a very limited intelligence, and we can only understand things that we have the qualification to understand. And we're limited by our ability, we're limited by our minds functioning. We're limited by our senses functioning. But in the same way that a dog or a cat or a bird or a fish is limited by what their senses and what their minds functioning can conceive, in our conditioned state, we are also limited to what we can conceive and understand, until our limitations are removed. For example, if you're in the body of a dog, you have limitations in that body. The body of a dog cannot understand, cannot read a novel. There's the limitation of a dog, many other limitations. In the same sense, as a human being, in the material bodies, we have these limitations. But the fortunate position we are in as human beings is that, according to the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, is that we as human beings have an opportunity to remove those limitations on our limited view of our position, how we got to be in this position, and where we're going. Although what's happening in the normal course of events in our society today, in society since time immemorial, at least in this Kali Yuga, is that we are convinced of our superiority as human beings, and we are convinced of our ability to speculate and identify the world around us through our senses and be able to logically and analytically explain it. And this attempt and endeavor goes on and on, generation after generation after generation, under the guise of what they're calling science. And this science is, this so-called science is this attempt to view the world and explain it. And it's really just a further expansion of the foolishness and the envy and the attempt to lord over the material nature. And unless and until that science is connected to the actual truth, then it has no value. Zero. Prabhupada made this point so many times in different ways. And one very poignant way was, he said, everything without Krishna, everything that you acquire, everything that you get, every scientific approach, every material thing, every this, everything that, is like a zero lined up in a row, all zeros. Now, once one comes in contact with Krishna consciousness and puts the proper integer in that row of zeros, it's like putting a 1 before all of those zeros. because actually everything can be used in Krishna's service. And that is the ultimate purpose of everything that is here in this material world. But it's being misused, misguided, and misdirected. And unfortunately, what is happening to the innocent people, in one sense, none of us are innocent in this material world, because we've all chosen with our free will to turn away from Krishna in some subconscious level at some point. That's what got us here. But the innocent public are being misled and misguided under the guise of so-called science, without and that so-called science does not have the basic 2+2 formulation correct, which is that life comes from life. Life does not come from matter. And the living principle is the soul. And the soul is connected to the supreme soul, Krishna. And with that understanding, everything else can actually start to make sense a lot more. Actually, even for the scientists, because they're always trying to evaluate and understand, what is this, what is that, what is the dark matter in this universe, what is the what is the principle that's holding it all together? We can't figure it out, but eventually we're going to figure it out. But it's the same old thing over and over again. And actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "He bhaje se bhada abhakta hin char. Krishna bhajane nahi jati kolade vichar." Anyone who takes to devotional service is exalted, whereas a non-devotee always is condemned and abominable. And therefore, in the discharge of devotional service to the Lord, there is no consideration of the status of one's family. So that means anyone can take to the devotional service. And until we take to that devotional service of Krishna, no matter how big we are in this material world, no matter how much scientific approaches we have or how much we've acquired, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says it, condemned and abominable. In one sense, this is a pretty fanatical, kind of extreme thing to say. Although, if we accept the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita as they are, there are things that may not necessarily, that certainly do not fit in with a moderate, middle of the road approach to spiritual life and life in general. And actually, this verse is spoken by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami. And this is a fitting pastime given the Shani Yatra, which is coming up, and the Jagannath Puri pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In fact, this is when Sanatana Goswami was going to meet Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, and Sanatana Goswami's plan what the plan of Sanatana Goswami was during this time when he went to go visit Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, what he was planning to do. Sanatana Goswami was planning to throw himself under the wheel of the cart at the Rath Yatra to end his life in the presence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he had contracted some disease, Sanatana Goswami, in his travels, which caused him to itch, and he had all of these open sores on his body that were oozing pus. And he had considered that he had become such an offender, and he had these problems going on with his body, that the best thing he could do is go there and in front of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, finish himself off by throwing himself under the wheel. And this is actually from chapter 4 in the Antya Lila. Very incredibly instructive chapter, actually. If anyone wants to have some nice reading, you could reread this chapter from the Chaitanya Charitamrita and get so much nectar. Because in this chapter, actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives so much instruction to Sanatana Goswami. And he tells him, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells Sanatana Goswami, that your body does not belong to you. So you cannot do what you are wanting to do. And it is in the mode of ignorance and passion for you to even consider that you would want to do this. And he told him that actually what you should do is go and you should be an instrument for me. And you should write and express the secrets of devotional service. And in that way, Sanatana Goswami was able to take that direction and write so many things, so many transcendental directions for us even to this day to be able to take into our devotional life. And the next verse after the first one that I just read, which is the Jai Bhaje Se Bhada Avaktahin Char, is Kabudi Chadiya Chara Shravana Kirtan Acharit Tabe Tabe Krishnera Charan. Give up all your nonsensical desires, for they are unfavorable for getting shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Engage yourself in chanting and hearing. Then you will soon achieve the shelter of Krishna without a doubt. So this is the formula. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was telling Sanatana Goswami this as he was there. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could understand his desire to want to end his life by throwing himself underneath the wheel. And despite the difficulties that Sanatana was undergoing with these sores in his body, and actually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even with the sores on the body, was embracing Sanatana Goswami. And at some point, actually cured him of this just by his embrace. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave the direction, the simple direction. Simple, maybe not so easy, but simple. and the first part is probably is the difficult part for us, for me, certainly. Give up all your nonsensical desires, for they are unfavorable for getting shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna. And in this particular verse, what was he giving the desire to? What was the desire that Sanatana Goswami had? Was to throw himself underneath the wheel of Jagannath cart, just because he wanted to do it because for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even that, he said, was a nonsensical desire. So in many ways, it's as those of us who are attempting to take to Krishna consciousness, and we may have the desire to serve, or the desire to do something in Krishna's service, but even that may be a nonsensical desire. So it is, what is instructive here is like to be able to take direction and guidance, and not from an authority, and not take the direction and guidance from our own mind. Because even if we think that we are doing something that is of the highest caliber in regards to, like, we're doing something in devotional service, we can't be sure, especially if we're making it up in our own mind. So this is the Vedic way. This is the parampara, disciplic succession. We follow the direction of the authority. And so it is important that we connect into an authority that has the spiritual understanding that can give us the guidance, and that is a guru, a bona fide guru. And in this sense, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is acting as the guru of Sanatana Goswami. And in that sense, he's guiding him to not make a mistake. And he's also giving him the direction in terms of what he should do with his life and with his energy. Another instructive point here is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in the same chapter, in this material world, conceptions of good and bad are all mental speculation. Therefore, saying this is good and this is bad is all a mistake. Which is another very kind of interesting point to try to consider for ourselves. Actually, Prabhupada says, and we see everything in this material world is bad until it has a connection with Krishna. But these conceptions and mental speculations, we spend so much time with our minds trying to consider what is good, what is bad. And as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, this is all a mistake. And if we can connect in to the spiritual direction and guidance from that higher authority, we can achieve the position. It's like it actually simplifies our life in one sense, because right now, when we're trying to mentally speculate, come up with what is good, what is bad, determine this, determine that, we're ending up lost and misdirected and misguided. Even a devotee as exalted as Sanatana Goswami is being misdirected and misguided by his own mind. What to speak of us? So the pressure comes off, actually, in one sense, from our own having to rely on our own abilities to being able to take shelter of a higher authority in Krishna consciousness. So here we have, some very nice direction and guidance from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in relation to how we can attain the highest goal of life, who can attain the highest goal of life, and what is the simple process for how to get there. Because ultimately, like, as we are in this, as we see it from these verses from today, this navel, saying the navel and the air of departure and death were combined createdly. The navel is the shelter for both, namely death and the separating force. So what's interesting here, where the life is coming from is also the shelter for death. So death is coming from the navel and life is coming from the navel. Both vibrations are generated from the abdominal hole. I guess this is what they call the yin and yang, the dichotomy of everything, which in the material world is always this dichotomy. So the body of the child develops from the mother, and when the child is separated from the body of the mother, it is separated by cutting the navel joint. And that is the way the Supreme Lord manifested himself as separated many. So it's like a reflection. Interesting, in this purport, Prabhupada says the living entities are therefore separated parts, and thus they have no independence. So we have no independence in the sense that we are eternally, our existence, our very life is a part of the supreme whole. And this knowledge, this understanding, this basic aspect of existence is the foundational element that is being missed in modern science, in modern understanding, modern attempts, not to say modern, but in the mental materialistic approach to try to understand. And this is what Srila Prabhupada was so enthusiastically directive to his students to spread out into the world and to share with people and to give to the world, because this basic understanding would change the way society views itself, and in turn to change the way that the whole structure of civilization is laid out. Because right now we're operating in a society that has the basic formula for the whole existence misdirect. It's like 2 + 2, and the basic big formula is off. So every attempt we make is not working, and then people are not happy. And everyone is just misguided and misdirected. So what is the Srimad Bhagavatam is here, what Srila Prabhupada is giving us, is to create a revolution in the impious lives of the misdirected people. So Srila Prabhupada's movement is a revolution. This is a educational message to the world for us to come back to our senses. So there's come back to our senses, but come back to our actual true selves. To come back to the true selves of who we really are and what this human life is actually meant for. And not to waste our life going after these nonsensical desires, as Srila Prabhupada puts it, or sorry, even as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu puts it in this verse. We are chasing collectively and individually nonsensical desires. And because of the apritya gyan, the knowledge being stolen by illusion, we can't see that we're collectively or individually, that we are not getting any closer to the happiness that we are seeking. And until we have the real solution, it's chewing the chew. And it's, I think Einstein said it, where you try a little like slivers into understanding. Insanity is defined by trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. But the issue with us, before we have spiritual knowledge, before we have guidance and direction from an acharya like Srila Prabhupada, before our eyes have been opened by devotees, the mercy of devotees, giving us a book, giving us some education, allowing us to come in contact with prasadam, the holy name. Until we have that, we don't even have the option. It's like we're living in a cardboard world. We keep trying the same thing, banging our heads against the wall, until that's what the beauty of, I think all of us in this call or listening to this, you've come to some point of having gotten the depth of reality, which is the actual depth and your life, comes life. You actually have, when you come to Krishna consciousness, you actually have a choice to choose real life. When without that, you're just trying to get satisfaction out of cardboard cutout of life. And it always turns out to be tasteless. At first, maybe you get a little something, but then it's bland. But in Krishna consciousness, it's like everything comes alive, turns into 3D when we get in touch with that message of Krishna. And so we're chasing these nonsensical desires collectively and individually, resisting the direction, resisting the teaching, which is causing us to keep taking the cycle of birth and death. And what happens? We're very happy when people are born, and it's, a happy birthday, this and that. Okay, they're coming out of the navel, they grew, they're cutting the umbilical cord, here we come, another cycle around. But actually it's a failure, because as Krishna puts it, any time in the Bhagavad Gita, anytime one takes birth, he's sure to die. And when one dies, one is sure to take birth again. This is the over and over and over again cycle. And because we are so densely conditioned, we keep attached to these nonsensical material desires, which keep us stuck. And so we have Srila Prabhupada and the acharyas and the merciful teachers giving us a very strong message, and that strong message was given for a reason, because we don't want to give it up. So the second verse is interesting point for the second verse, and I'll tie this up relatively soon, and we'll go in if anyone has any questions or comments about this. The 29, it says, the rivers and seas, being controlling deities of the two, keep the intestines and arteries in healthy orders, in healthy order. I find this to be very reflective type of thing, because look at what's happening in the rivers and the seas of our current planetary civilization system, right? The rivers and seas are being polluted by so much nonsense. Why? Because we're trying to do so many things, to create so many things, material things. In the creation of those material things, we're pumping out so much of the earth's lifeblood, whatever oil, whatever it is, they're pumping it out and they're burning it all up so they can create all of these things, so that they can feed the senses the things that they want. And it's like more and more and more, pump and make and make. And in the process of that, so much waste is being created and pollution is being poured out into the world. And where does so much of it end up? In the rivers and the seas. And as this purport puts, the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and the arteries. And what is the controlling aspect of those arteries? The rivers and the seas. And just like that, so what's happening, and then you see the human beings, so many different ailments in their arteries and in there, in in the intestines and the arteries is like the number one cause of death in America is heart disease. Because the arteries are being choked within and without, all throughout the, so is there a connection, a correlation? I mean, seems like there is. We want to look at things from a very strictly, material perspective, and to say, oh, well, how could the controlling deities of the rivers and seas keeping the intestines and arteries in healthy order? Like, scientifically, that would never be accepted. But until we can actually recognize and understand that there are subtle energies, and although we relate to things being subtle as being not as powerful, but actually the subtle is the most powerful. And so until we can understand and recognize that even our health and our existence and the things that keep us alive long enough to actually be able to make advancement is coming from the subtle energies that are controlling what is going on internally and what is going on externally in this world, until we can understand and recognize that there are subtle energies and there are controlling deities and there is a supreme controller, then we are doomed to failure. And in that way, we have the great fortune of taking the direction that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave to Sanatana Goswami. Understanding that no matter who we are, no matter what level we've come from, what kind of birth we've taken, from a family of dog eaters to the highest, most aristocratic caste or family, whether it be Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Swahili, or everything in between, that it is our birthright, and that by giving up our nonsensical desires and performing devotional service through Kali Yuga, at least by starting chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which is the Maha Mantra, the mantra that purifies our hearts, purifies the contamination, to give us the intelligence to recognize that these things even exist, which puts the one in front of all the zeros that we've been grasping after for our entire countless lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And this is the opportunity for us to actually have a successful go around in this wheel of birth and death. And that success will be giving up those desires, purifying our hearts, and becoming who we truly are, uncovering and fully connecting into who we truly are, which is a servant of Krishna, a servant of the Supreme. And in that, our full, truest expression and self can come out, and our full intelligence and our Sat Chit Ananda, our eternal, blissful, full of knowledge, truth, can fully manifest. And we can find the happiness that we are seeking and find the true bliss that is what Krishna wants for us. So for that, I will end this class here and ask for any questions, corrections, or anything that devotees might want to say in relation to this. And thank you very much. Feel free to interrupt me, but I'll just say, when I was studying for this verse, I actually even, I asked Vishnu Prabhu, like, these verses were like so far out. I couldn't even think of like what I would talk about, because I'm thinking like, I really, how does this all work? But yeah, I just tried to kind of follow what was there, what was coming up for me as I was reading them. So I hope that it was on point and, or, kind of the relation to what this verse was expressing and what the points that I was making had a connection and a correlation, and that it made sense. So Vishnugadar Prabhu was even saying, well, he just kind of said, well, just, do your best. Okay. Anything that anyone would like to say?
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Nice class. Very nicely you explained everything. We have to remove our nonsensical desire and do the bhakti. But I have a question. How these rivers and seas, they are the controller of intestines and arteries? They are the deities and like Devi, like God and God. Adi, we studied about Adi, Devik Shakti. Are they those Shaktis to control our intestine and arteries?
Yes. So this is part of the challenging aspect, one of the more challenging aspects of the verses that I was really trying to understand. Although I think if we can take it for what is being described, the rivers and seas being the controlling deities of the two. So there's there's a connection between what's happening in the rivers and seas and what's happening internally with our arteries. Like if you look at pictures of like the earth and what the veins and the arteries look like in our bodies, and how the rivers and waterways flow on land, we can see a correlation actually. So in some macro way, like kind of large scale way, and in the subtle, like there's this, what's being described here is that there's a connection between the two, and the controlling deities, they're controlling both. So the controlling deities who are controlling the rivers and seas are also controlling the intestines and arteries in the human being.
Okay.
How's that? I'm not sure, but it's
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
okay. Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Pranam, Prabhu.
Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you.